Good afternoon. I'm Imani Humphreys-Torres, a member of the City School Student Media Team and a student at Western High School. Thank you for joining us for our first 2020 installment of North Avenue News with Dr. S, a series of Facebook Live events where we dive into important issues such as impacting education in Baltimore City. Joining us, as always, is the CEO of City Schools, Dr. Sonja Brookins Santelises. Good afternoon, Dr. S.
Good afternoon, Imani. It's good to see you.
Good to be here with you.
Great.
So, this afternoon, we'll discuss a series of important issues that figure to play a central role in my future and those of my peers, including safety, defining student wholeness, and the work of the Kirwan Commission. Are you ready to get started, Dr. S?
Absolutely.
Great, let's begin. So, in the last inaugural Student Climate Survey results, some of the lowest scores were found within the area of physical safety and bullying. What were your initial reactions and responses to this?
So, some of my initial reactions were absolutely disappointment. We weren't fully surprised, just in terms of some of the feedback we had already begun hearing from young people. And the survey results really pointed to the fact that students, who are our primary customer, were not as safe as they could be, and we wanted them to be. So the survey results were in a lot of ways affirming, but also a way to really mobilize and say, we've really got to double down and concentrate on efforts, because when when students don't feel safe in schools, it doesn't matter what else is going on.
So do you personally, and from that response, I can kind of gauge the idea, believe that Baltimore City Public Schools are a safe environment to learn in?
I think that they are. I think overall they're safe. We have challenges because we are in a city where safety is challenging right now. But I would say that one of the things I'm most proud of is our work and our progress in this area. So as we have considered, issues of safety, it hasn't been about, where do we have metal detectors and, all of those kinds of things. It really starts with what does a positive, healthy school culture look like? And, part of my conversations with young people is what they're really highlighting is relationships, right? So when you look at an issue like bullying, that's about how two human beings connect, don't connect, and then what are the boundaries that are set, but also what are the skills that young people and adults build up to be able to have healthy relationships, recognize that, and when appropriate, sure, we do have to go to the code of discipline to be able to correct behavior.
Just having that structure in place kind of helps ease the process, I feel like, in a sense.
I would agree. And one of the things, Imani, that I heard just the other night is that when young people when students know the structure, know there's a structure there, they can follow it. Some of the feedback that they've been giving, that your colleagues, your peers have been giving me, is we need to focus in on the structure being consistent, right, across all schools. So that overall is, I think, for us, a real emphasis, as you noted, to why things like making sure that procedures are clear. We focused on, visitor policy, right? What is the policy for visitors? What is, the kind of school culture we want to build? What do respectful relationships and interactions look like?
So kind of just knowing that feedback and already having an outline of a plan in place, what true steps do you have for your administration to start, the direction to start moving in?
Well, so I think a couple of things. We heard loud and clear from families, from students that, as you noted, bullying itself is an issue, and so we are launching a bullying task force study group to really make specific recommendations. But a lot of the work that we are doing in this area, yes, has to do with physical plan and visitor policies, but it really has been a deep focus on what we call student wholeness, right? And how are we making sure that young people who have social emotional needs, right? If you are going through something, and this, you're a young person, right? And even some adults, when you're going through things, if you don't have a way to process that,
can be challenging to function.
Exactly. It's challenging to function, and it can spill over in other relationships. I mean, I even know that as a mom, right? There are some times where I might, raise my voice with one of my girls louder than I want it to be, and it's not anything with them, it's something else spilling over. And so one of the things that we really have been investing in, will continue to invest in, our wholeness strategies around social emotional learning. Like, how do we equip young people to be more aware of different strategies of dealing with their own anxiety, their own emotions that come from, in a lot of cases, real legitimate challenges, and a lot of which, from what young people have told me, a lot of which originate outside of school. True. And so our goal really is to get better at having school communities where young people, adults, have the resources, have additional resources to turn to in order to help process that. At the same time, and I know a little bit about you and your, love of art and those kinds of things. For some young people, it's, look, if I get to draw, if I get to paint. For some other young people, it's music or poetry writing, right, that helps them begin to process, helps them begin, to put those in place. But at the same time, we have to have standards for interaction with one another. And I think we, to your point, really have doubled down on getting clear about processes so that students, adults don't feel like, depending on who it is, there's going to be a different outcome than if it's somebody else. Young people should be able to count on some consistency.
So, because like you were saying, for many students there are possible outlets. For those who don't have those outlets, what can their families do as well as themselves to kind of improve the safety situation for both themselves and their learning environment? It's
a great question. So one of the things that we have committed to here in Baltimore City is the expansion of community schools. Okay. And the real driver behind community schools is, how do we equip schools to be able to take advantage of a lot of the existing resources in the city to help people process some of the challenges of life. So whether it's substance abuse, whether it's a need for housing or employment. Roberta's House does wonderful work with families who have experienced loss through violence. And so part of the work we're doing in community schools is saying, how do we connect young people, and something you mentioned, and their families to those resources? Because oftentimes what we're hearing from schools is people don't know where to go, right? You might be going through something and you don't know where to go to get the support to process that. So I do think that's one of the places where we are really working to make sure that families, their students, their children are connected to the existing resources, and then having more resources to really partner with the city. Right, and so one of the things that we know is Councilman Zeke Cohen has really worked to pass trauma legislation to be a trauma-informed city. And so one of the things, for example, we committed to this year is making sure every school has at least one full-time social worker. Okay. Prior to this year, some schools had a social worker, and young people know this, who would be there 1 day a week, 2 days a week.
Or to cut their time between other schools.
Exactly. And right? When you're cutting your time between two places, it's hard to actually build a relationship. So we committed to making sure we had additional dollars that went so that every school has at least one full-time social worker. I think the other thing in the partnership with the city gets to this question of, how do adults in schools, and frankly those of us outside of schools, better recognize signs of trauma to be able to help young people process? And I hear over and over again, unfortunately, that young people in our city are grappling with incredible challenges. And, they say, nobody knows, right? Where I came into school, my teacher was asking me about homework, and I had something really challenging happen to me the day before. And so part of where we're moving with the city is really trying to partner to better connect young people earlier to the kind of help and support that helps you get over and process through some of that. And I am never never happy when I hear of a young person who's experienced something and feels like he or she has to go through it alone. It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't. And so I think really what Councilman Cohen is working towards is something that will push those of us across the city to do a better job at working with one another on behalf of our citizens and our young people.
I feel like it's really up to administration to, in a sense, humanize the students, right? They need to understand that, like, outside of just those 6 hours, once that bell rings, there are personalized issues that occur outside of those buildings, you know?
And it's so funny, Imani, because what you just said, and not funny, laugh, but it's striking to me how many times I've heard that. How many times students have said, you know, if people really knew what I had to go through just to get here this morning, you know, they would understand why, I'm spacing out a little bit this morning. I'm not fully focused on calculus or American history or algebra, right? Because I got a whole lot of other stuff that I'm trying to process, and in a lot of ways, just getting here was enough. And what adults have said to us, what teachers have said to us when we've pushed on it, is a lot of them don't know the signs. And so there are signs that human beings give off, that young people give off, that we're hoping that if we do get smarter about how to recognize that, that we can get folks to help and support. And then the other piece is, how do we have environments where young people want to share, right?
That's a good point. I feel like sometimes it's like, if the teachers can't relate to you, you're not going to want to relate or share with them.
Yes. And again, what does relate look like, right?
That's true.
Right, because not everybody, you know, when I was teaching, not every student was like, oh, I want to go, you know, to her. But are there other adults
that you can at least depend on?
That's exactly right. And every young person deserves one adult, at least one, who can champion them, who they can go to. I hear from teachers all the time of students who, even past graduation, will call back to them to say, you're the one person who always, you know, heard me and supported me. And so a lot of the safety questions are really tied to this idea of wholeness, of how do we address young people and, frankly, our faculty as whole people. And to your point, I'm not just who you see in class, and I'm not just the grade you gave me on my last paper. I got a whole lot of other things about me.
Like, I'm not just a statistic.
I'm not just a statistic. I'm not just my test score, right? So good. Oh, you've got this. We should switch up sides. Imani could do the other side.
Appreciate it.
Yes.
So before we continue, I just want to take a moment to not only thank our viewers for tuning in, but also remind you, if you have any questions, just as the first episode in a series, feel free to place them in the comment section below, and we'll be sure to get to them in the next episodes. So I kind of want to touch on another topic today, which is the work of the Kirwan Commission. Before we get into those questions, do you mind just elaborating on what that is?
Sure. So really briefly, the Kirwan Commission is named after Dr. Britt Kirwan, the former chancellor for the University of Maryland system. And I will tell you, I've personally met and gone to a number of meetings with Dr. Kirwan, and he really is a champion for high quality education for all students across the state. The Kirwan Commission actually was formed by the governor and his team in the state to study and say, what would it take basically to have Maryland be a 21st century education, provide a 21st century education for all of its young people. And so they did deep research. What do states, districts, countries do in the education of their young people to actually attain high results? The Kirwan Commission published some of those results, and those results, as you know, whenever you make a wish list of what you want, what's the next question?
How much?
How much, right? And so the second part of the Kirwan's work that a lot of folks may have heard about is determining how much does it cost, how much can the state afford, and that's pretty much their work. This session that began last week, I think, or a week and a half ago, was the start of a session where our state legislature, along with other state leaders, will take up the question of what does a 21st century education look like? How do we make sure every Baltimorean and Marylander have what they need, and how much does it cost?
Nice. All right. So why should students and families be invested in this if they're not really paying attention to the fiscal aspects of school?
Well, what I would say is families and young people should pay attention, and even if you feel as if you're not paying attention to all those fiscal number matters, you actually are. Every time we have to close a school because there's no air conditioning. Every time we have to close a school because there's no heat. Every time a young person says, wow, I would really love to play an instrument, but my school doesn't offer an instrument, or I'd like to learn a new language and I can't learn that new language, right? Every time I get an email, every time, I go to a community session and I hear all of the things that we believe young people should have as part of their education, all those gaps where we fall short have dollar bills attached to them. So what I would say is, if you're paying attention to any of those other things that I mentioned, you actually are paying attention.
Like you're within the process, whether you think you are or not.
That's exactly right. And I know everybody cares about being warm in the winter and cool in the summer, right, or in the warmer months. So you actually do need to care about Kirwan. Pay attention. If you're on social media, that's a time. I know nobody's expecting to hear this from the CEO of schools, but this is a great time to actually post questions. Like post questions, post comments, let people know that as Baltimoreans we want to be heard, and we're part of a larger chorus of the state, but it's absolutely important to make your voice heard.
Nice. So where are we in the process of the Kirwan Commission right now?
So right now, there are two bills or proposed bills in the state legislature. As a matter of fact, the first two bills in the House this session, HB1, is dealing with school construction dollars, which would bring additional dollars to jurisdictions across the state to build new school buildings. The second will be specifically what they call the Kirwan bill. And the major challenge right now is coming to some consensus, some agreement between the governor, the legislature, elected officials at the state level and local level around how we're going to pay for something. I think the good news is I don't think there are very many people in the state of Maryland who don't agree that we should have high quality education. The question that folks are going to see is questions about how do we pay for it? How much of the cost is assumed by the local district? How much the local government agency, and how much is taken from the state? And in the case of Baltimore City, we are also facing the fact that our school district has actually been underfunded, and a lot of people don't know that. And you know, because you've been covering it, right? That, Baltimore City, the state legislative office, we didn't say we've been shorted $300 million. The state said Baltimore City should have been receiving $300 million more every year just for general education. But the state also said, Imani, that we have a $3 billion, that's not million, $3 billion backlog in funding for school buildings. So if you want to know why we don't have air conditioning,
there it is.
If you want to know why we have to close school with heating issues, there it is.
$3 billion backlog sounds like
it sounds like a lot of money. I'm glad they're not coming to me for it, because I don't have $3 billion. But yes, but that's what's on the line.
So if we do get the money that was in talks, does this mean we'll start moving into like the direction of building new buildings?
Yes, and we're very excited, as a lot of high schools would be, as you know, because you've covered it, Imani. Like the 21st century school program has been wonderful for our city and our young people and our families and communities. And if the next wave of school construction money goes through, the Baltimore City Board of Commissioners voted last night to approve a plan that with additional money, we would actually be able to begin work or fund work on up to 5 new high schools.
Oh, wow.
And so under the 21st century, we have already rebuilt good 5 high schools when all is said and done.
Yeah.
Forest Park, Patterson High is up. Let's see, not ACE, Reach. And so we already have schools like Digital, Dunbar that have already gone through renovation. What this money would mean would be schools like Douglas, City College, Poly, Western. Those large high schools would also now be in the queue. Edmonds and West Side.
So I'll have to come back and visit. I'm jealous.
I was just going to say, and you know what? You remained very calm when I said that. I was like, oh, I'm waiting for her
unfortunate. To but I'm glad the next generation will have, those spaces to be great and to succeed.
That's right. Well, and what I always say when people ask about Baltimore City is that we have young people, so many that are already great, in spite of the fact that we are not providing as a larger community everything that they deserve.
And that really speaks to the students and the families and the faculty, just like supporting them and being there.
That's exactly right. That's it. Well, that's why you're as wonderful as you are, because you weren't waiting.
Yes. So we're going to move into our final question of the episode. So with the influx of kind of funds coming in, how is this going to reflect into student wholeness as well as just like safety?
That's a great question. So what additional dollars would, mean for us in city schools is one, additional dollars for medical professionals in schools. So even in the first round of dollars we received, if you look at some of the early legislation, there's a real commitment to make sure that there's a full-time registered nurse in every school. There would be additional dollars for extracurricular activities. So in terms of that wholeness, a lot of schools that got some initial money for what we call concentration of poverty dollars are building back mentoring programs, after-school robotics programs, those kinds of things. That, again, that's a different way to heal, right? If you don't have to just sit and kind of go through what can sometimes feel like the drudgery of the day-to-day, thank you, and, go and pick up a trumpet or go put a robot together or sit with a mentoring group. That's a way, to build back opportunity. So we want opportunity in that, and those Kirwan dollars will help us do that.
Nice. Plus, it kind of provides a space for students to grow and heal outside of just the day's over. You got to go back to whatever situation you left that morning.
Yes, without it, and I think that's a great way to put it, to grow and heal. Yeah. And a matter of fact, you should copyright that one. So I think it's going to be our next one. But it really is. It's about growing and healing, and it's part of why we're committed. While we recognize, yes, this is a city for which a large number of people have been traumatized, but it really is, as school folks, we really want to be focused on the growing and healing part, right? How do we grow and heal? So see, look at that. You're gonna call and charge me now for using grow and heal.
I'll give it to you for free. You've helped me so much over the years.
Yay! Look at that. I'm glad. I'm glad.
All right, great. Well, it's been great talking with you.
You too.
So I just want to quickly thank both our viewers and Dr. S for joining us today with this episode of the North Avenue News. Be sure to visit our Facebook page often for updates about city schools. This has been Imani Humphreys-Torres with the City School Student Media Team. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Yes,
nicely done. Look at you. You're smooth now. You can tell you're a senior. You just kind of